Good evening, everyone. Welcome to an evening with Peter King. And thank you for attending, and thank you for your support of the Save Our Sports Initiative. My name is Russ Tyler, and I'm honored to be host for this evening's event. Now, we have a few announcements. If there happens to be an emergency, which is extremely unlikely, so there's two exits in the back, and there's one over here, there's probably one over there, and we're probably not going to need them. But if that happens, stay calm, proceed under control. Cell phones, probably a good idea to shut them off unless you're a coach at Enfield High School and you're trying to recruit athletes from some other place where you think they get texts from them tonight. And certainly keep those on so you can build have winning teams even more. All right, so the format tonight will include a brief tribute to Enfield High School's own John Ashton from the class of 1966, and then to be an introduction of Peter, and then some opening remarks by Peter. At that point, we'll open it up so for questions from those in the audience and responses from Peter, and as needed, some interviewing by the host and responses from Peter. Now we're going to mix in a short video from one of Peter's best friends, that's ESPN's Chris Berman, aka Swami. He sent a video along. And of course, very important messages of thanks and appreciation we will be sharing with you tonight. There's no intermission scheduled, and although this event is slated to last 2 hours, at the end of the formal portion of the program, Peter will make himself available to greet old friends and some new for a short period of time, and then I don't know what the hell he's talking, he's going to get back to Brooklyn. Come on, Peter! Is Paul De Silva in the audience somewhere? Paul, if you could just come up here for a minute, we'd like to have you join us at the up front. So I'd like to introduce the members of the SOS, or Save Our Sports Committee, and they're seated right up front now that Paul has decided to join the team again. So my far right is Paul De Silva. Next to Paul is Bob Brummage, and then Peter King. And me, I'm the guy riding the coattails of Bob, Paul, and Peter. Very grateful to do so. Now, so you have the four of us up here, and three of us have on Enfield Eagles shirts, and Bob has Enfield Eagles colors. And we have these things on because we're proud of Enfield High School, and we love Enfield High School. Enfield High School had a tremendous impact on all four of us. But know this, if you hear remarks about the foursome up front here, one comment you will not hear tonight, you won't hear this tonight, is, my, don't those boys look cute? Now, from the absurd to the magnificence of John Ashton. Enfield High School lost a treasured native son on September 26th of this year, when iconic Hollywood actor John Ashton passed away in Boulder, Colorado. John was a member of the EHS class of 1966, who starred on the Enfield High School football teams. He was not as tough as nails. He was harder than the hardest nail on the gridiron, and a tremendous teammate who always put the team first. He sharpened his acting skills right here in this very auditorium. John loved the Enfield Lamplighters and had leading roles in several Lamplighter productions during his high school career. He appeared in Tea House of the August Moon as a sophomore, and I believe that he played Clarence Darrow in Inherit the Wind as a junior and had a leading role in Oklahoma as Judd in his senior year. John Ashton was a Hollywood megastar, having appeared in countless feature films and television shows. Perhaps John is best known for his role as Detective Sergeant John Taggart in Beverly Hills Cop movies while performing right alongside Eddie Murphy and Judge Reinhold. We think that John would like us to forego observing a traditional moment of silence for what we believe he would consider a much more fitting tribute. In honor of and in memory of John Ashton, class of 1966, please join in with an Enfield High round of applause. Now, on to Peter. Peter King was born and raised in Enfield and attended JFK Middle School, then JFK Junior High School, and Enfield High School, where he was a top-notch student athlete, playing varsity soccer, basketball, and baseball before graduating in 1975. He proceeded to Athens, Ohio, where in 1979 he earned his degree from the renowned E.W. Scripps School of Journalism at Ohio University. Peter launched his career in sports journalism in 1980 at the Cincinnati Enquirer, and in 1985 moved on to Newsday, staying there until 1989 when he made the shift to Sports Illustrated. Peter remained with Sports Illy for 29 years, and in May of 2018 announced that he would be leaving SI and heading to NBC Sports. He stayed at NBC Sports until he called it a day in February of this year. He's the author of 5 books, and he's been named National Sports Writer of the Year 3 times. That's right, National Sports Writer of the Year 3 times. He is also an inductee of the National Sports Media Association Hall of Fame, finding his name alongside Joe Buck, Jim Nance, Chris Berman, and so many other illustrious sports media figures. And let's give special attention to the fact that the most important accolade of all for Peter is his induction into the Enfield Athletic Hall of Fame in 1999. Some refer to Peter as a generational talent in the sports journalism field. Now, we don't want to quibble, but that's not correct. In our estimation, he's a multi-generational talent. Consider remarks by Sports Illustrated's editor-in-chief upon Peter's retirement from Sports Illy in 2018, and I quote, "Peter, in my opinion, is one of the 5 most important figures in SI history," end of quote. The magazine was founded in 1954, so that remark, when made, covered a period of over 64 years. So seated here tonight with us is a multi-generational talent who has returned home to provide a boost to the town that he holds so dear. Thomas Wolfe, the 20th century literary behemoth, penned a masterpiece entitled "You Can't Go Home Again." Great, but Thomas Wolfe doesn't have a damn clue about what makes Peter King tick. Let's give Peter an Enfield Connecticut. You can go home again. Peter, your turn.
Russ, you didn't say enough about me.
I know that, Peter.
Listen, this is one of the honors of my life to come back to Enfield and to help do something that when Russ and Paul and Bob called me, I don't know, late spring, early summer, they said, "Hey, listen, We've had massive budget cuts in this school system. We're really trying to do something to restore the 17 sports that have been eliminated. And look, I'm not in the blame game in any way, shape, or form. It's not easy to try to make up for in a town the size of Enfield with so many economic winds buffeting all schools. It's not easy when somebody says, oh, by the way, this year you're losing 12% of your school budget. I mean, it's a kick in the teeth. And, never mind that 127 teachers and staff members were laid off. I mean, it's awful, but, there's no blame here. There's no anything. All there is, I believe, when they called and told me this, I said, I gotta try to do something. And something that they suggested, Bob, Paul, and Russ, is let's do something to try to raise money to get 279 kids back on the athletic fields and courts. And let's try to get 17 teams back in 6th through 9th grade for the 25-26 calendar year. And so, we went to work. And I'm just so grateful. And I'll tell you a few stories that some of the people who really helped, who stepped forward and helped in a huge way. But I'll start by telling you a story that I was telling Mark and David Teed. Their dad, Bill Teed, was my soccer coach in high school. And just in case you maybe didn't really know what it was like to play for Bill Teed or what it was like to play for Bob Brummage, all I can say is I felt like I played for Lombardi and Rockne. Not necessarily that they're the greatest coaches of all time, but they weren't exactly the welcome wagon. But anyway, so 50 years ago, this month was my last high school soccer game with Bill Teed. And it was a Connecticut State tournament game, right down here on the lower field. I mean, it certainly has changed massively. God, there's a lighted football field with turf. I mean, this is Enfield? But anyway, so we played Greenwich High School in this game. And in Greenwich, football was their big sport, and soccer wasn't. Right? They were right around 500, but they came up here with 3 minutes to go. We're ahead 2-0 in the game. And I don't know how it happened. We lost the game 3-2. That was a bad loss right there. But I tell you the story not to have you weep for me, but to tell you that I told this story to a pretty famous Greenwich High School graduate and a pretty good football player. His name is Steve Young. So Steve Young played at Greenwich, went on to Brigham Young, played for the 49ers, obviously, is in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. He played in a Super Bowl in 1995 against the San Diego Chargers. He set a record that still stands with 6 touchdown passes in that game. And afterwards, my assignment for Sports Illustrated was to tail Steve Young for the whole night. And so his agent was a guy named Lee Steinberg, and I told him, and he said, yeah, no problem, just stick close to us. He's going to do about 20 post-game interviews here, and then we're going to get in the car and go back. This is in Miami, going back to the hotel. So I hung around with Steve, and at one point he sees me, and he goes, Peter, it was very humid that night, being in Miami. He said, Peter, I need you to go back somewhere, some way, I don't know. Find me as much either Gatorade or water as you can, and a little bit of food. I'm dying here, I'm dehydrated. So I went underneath the stands, and somewhere I found 3 bottles of Gatorade and, I don't know, 6 or 8 cookies, and I brought him out, and he drank the 3 bottles of red Gatorade immediately. So that's like 60 ounces in 3 minutes. He finishes his thing, he gets in a limo, excuse me, Lee Steinberg, Steve Young. And he's in the limo, and he goes, man, I don't feel too good. And so I'm sitting over on the side, and Steve is sitting across from his agent, Lee Steinberg. And 3 seconds after he said, I don't feel too good, a torrent of red vomit spewed out of his mouth that made him look like he was auditioning for The Exorcist. And for those of you too young to know that, please do not go see that movie. Because it's emblazoned on my brain, and not in a good way. But anyway, Steve Young vomits all over Lee Steinberg's shoes and pants. And Steinberg says, well, I guess I'll never watch these shoes again. But anyway, so Steve Young, that's how I know Steve and wrote about him a lot over the years. One of the great human beings, truly, one of the great human beings I've been fortunate enough to meet in my life as a journalist. But anyway, I now have 2 grandchildren who live in Berkeley, California, along with my daughter Laura and her wife Kim. So they're together in Berkeley, and I called Steve one day about 3 months ago and said, Steve, you probably remember I'm from Enfield, and I'm doing this thing, I'm trying to help them raise money. One day, when I'm out in Berkeley seeing my family, how would you feel about having lunch somewhere? He lives in Palo Alto, which is south of San Francisco. And I said, how would you feel about maybe having lunch one day? He said, Peter, I'll have lunch with you anytime, but why don't we just make this easy? I'll just write you a check for $5,000. So Steve Young wrote a check for $5,000, and if you look at the GoFundMe page, you'll see J. Steve Young, which is Steve Young contributing $5,000 for a town that the only reason he knows it is because it's in the same state. And a lot of times when we were together over the years, I would talk to him about it. But, so, and we'll get into a few more things. But, the one other thing I wanted to say is that, especially to the young people here, sometimes it feels like I'm in Enfield, Connecticut. How in the world in Enfield, Connecticut can I go do something at the highest level of whatever? If I want to be a doctor, I want to be a lawyer, I want to be an athlete, I want to be a journalist, I want to be, and you might just say, oh my God, I mean, come on, Enfield, Connecticut, how can you get there from here? Now, this is going to sound totally full of braggadocio, but I was in Enfield, Connecticut, and I got to the highest level of my job. And the reason that I got to the highest level of my job, I'll give you 2 reasons. Number one, my parents were absolutely incredible, and they instilled in me the belief that I could do whatever I wanted to do. That is so important. But the other thing is, Enfield, you can make it from here, because I always felt like, I never felt like, oh my God, I'm in the bushes, I'm in the sticks, I can't do anything, Enfield is close to Boston, it's close to New York. There's a lot of activities here that you can take advantage of depending on your chosen field. And look, I just always felt like Enfield trained me and raised me to be able to go out into the world and to say, I can do whatever I want. And so I just want you to know that you can get there from here. And just work. And then when you're finished working, work some more. So that's my little education lesson for the day. Russ, you tell me. I can stand here for 4 hours and talk, because I've done that my whole life. I'm a good talker. But if we want to organize it in some way where people ask questions or whatever,
We'll do that right now, Peter.
Okay, can I just tell one other story?
Yeah,
I'll tell you.
that's okay, you have my permission.
So, I tried to think tonight, who would we really like to hear about? Who would we like to hear a story about? I figured, we're in the heart of New England, let's tell a Tom Brady story.
Oh, yeah.
So, I was really fortunate. In 2004, Tom Brady was named the Sports Illustrated Sportsman of the Year. At the time, it wasn't very politically correct. He was the Sportsman of the Year. And the event was in New York. And the managing editor of the magazine at the time was a guy named Terry McDonald, who in his speech said, probably the biggest reason why Tom is getting this award tonight is a few things that Peter King told me after covering Tom, and one of which was that he went to the Patriots when he easily, after winning 2 Super Bowls, easily could have said, I don't care what anybody else makes, I want to be the highest paid player in football, and I deserve it, and you gotta pay me. But here's what Tom said. Said, basically, listen, just don't embarrass me. And I want you to make sure that you spend every dime you have available under the salary cap to make sure that you make the best team that's possible to make. I don't care. I can make a lot of money otherwise. I just want to make sure that we do everything we can to do this. So Terry McDonald tells that story. And after the event, Tom Brady's dad comes up to me and he says, you really don't know what this night means. When Tom was a boy, and he was in 7th, 8th grade, and the 49ers were huge at the time, Joe Montana, and later Steve Young. He said, Tom would come home from school, and he would go right away to the pile of mail on Thursday to see if Sports Illustrated came, because he would want to read every word written about his beloved 49ers. So he said, that's why tonight means so much. Sports Illustrated was just huge to him. And for you to go out on a limb, I can tell you something, our family is never going to forget that. Now, who knows why things happen in life, you're not really sure. And how in the world was I to know that Brady was going to win 7 Super Bowls? I didn't. But I covered him. When you're in my job covering the NFL on a national level, you got to get to know the quarterbacks, you got to get to know the coaches, period. I set out every year. The people I'm going to know as well as anybody else are the coaches, 32 coaches, 32 quarterbacks. Anyway, after the Super Bowl when in Houston, when Brady and the Patriots came back from the 28-3 deficit to beat the Atlanta Falcons, I said to him, I actually wrote him a text in the early morning hours of Monday, and I said, Tom, this is the greatest comeback of all time in the Super Bowl, and I really want to write about it next week at great length, and I need 1 hour of your time, anytime between now and Sunday at 6 p.m. You name the place, I'll be there. So it shows how much influence I have that Wednesday, 6 p.m., I haven't heard from him. So I said, okay, well, I'm going to give it one more shot. So I wrote him this longer text, and I said in the text, I said, one day, your 2 sons are going to say, Dad, what really happened that game in the Super Bowl? How in the world did you come back from 28-3 down to win that game? And I said, I'll record this, and I'll hand you the recording. And you can use it for whatever you want the rest of your life. You ever write a book, but I said, this is within days of winning this game. One of the greatest games in football history. I just want to get you while memories are still fresh, everything like that. And so one day you can tell your kids about it and be very, very accurate. So the next morning I get a text, he said, all right, you have a choice. you can meet me in Boston at some point on Friday for an hour, or you can meet me in Montana on Sunday. Because he and his family, he and, at the time, Giselle, and the kids were going to Montana where they have a place, and they were going to go skiing. Brady loves to ski. So I said, I mean, what would you do? I'm going to Montana. Come on. So anyway, went to Montana, spent 86 minutes with him, sitting there. One of the things I'll always remember about that is, you guys know what vitamin water is, obviously. It comes in these 20-ounce bottles. So during the 86 minutes I spent with him, he opened 3 bottles of vitamin water, and in each one, he poured a packet of TB12 electrolytes. So, for those who don't really know about electrolytes, they're supposed to be good for you. Anyway, so and he shakes it up and drinks them all in 86 minutes. So we finished, and I said, last thing, I got to get a picture of it. And let's do it with the Rocky Mountains in the background. This is an utterly beautiful place. And he goes, I'll only take it if you're in the picture. I said, okay, I'll be in the picture. So he says, honey, honey. And so we're in a cabin. But to describe this in a cabin, as a cabin, would be saying that a 3-bedroom suite at the Ritz-Carlton is a Motel 6 room. This was a nice dump, shall we say. And so he calls, and Giselle comes in. I had met her before, but anyway, exchange pleasantries, talk, and we walk outside, take a photo, shake his hand, thank him, leave. And so now it's about, I don't know, 5 or 6 o'clock Eastern time. I got to get to the bottom of this mountain, get to a hotel, and write as fast as I can. But I sent the photo in, and I said, listen, in my column tomorrow, my column at the time was called Monday Morning Quarterback. In my column tomorrow, this picture has to be used. Let's play it up big. And I want the photo credit in there to be photo by Giselle Bunching. And so that's what happened. So the most famous photo credit in the history of Sports Illustrated was not by one of its own storied, wonderful, fantastic photographers. It was by Giselle Bunching. So that's my Tom Brady story. So it's probably best, as Russ says, what do we want to do?
Our group, Peter and everybody in the audience, Corey O'Connell is back there with the microphone. He's our athletic director, did a terrific job for the SOS group, and it looks like, is that Jay Belcher?
Hey, while he's doing that, can I just tell one other quick thing about the money we raised, which is like the coolest thing? I think. So, a bunch of people, I covered the NFL for 40 years, so I got to know a lot of people. So, one person we would all recognize, his name, asked me, what are you doing? He called me one day in the summer, what are you doing? And I explained to him about what Save Our Sports was and what we were doing for my hometown. And he goes, what's happening in this country just pisses me off. And I said, what do you mean? And he goes, nobody thinks anything about cutting things like extracurricular activities and cutting sports and all that. I said, now wait a second. I said, I think they care deeply. I think the school system was wounded to cut all these teachers' jobs and to cut sports. There's no blame to go around. He said, yeah, but sports is what is the only thing I remember about my school life and my high school life and my college life. So he says, I'm going to send you a donation. Give me your address. I gave my address in Brooklyn, and I don't know, about a week later, I opened an envelope from him, and there's a check for $25,000. So I would just tell you that I know I I hear rumors that we live in a bit of a divided society right now. But there's some damn good people out there. And they've really helped this cause right here, right now. So anyway, Corey, what do we got out there?
All right, so Peter, Corey's got
Yeah.
a mic, and Dave White has a mic also. I've got to apologize to Dave for referring to him as Jay Goucher. Dave, I am so sorry, my God.
He doesn't care.
I'm dead. So Dave White, if you want to ask a question, raise your hand and they'll get a mic to you. Peter's ready up here to answer or respond to questions you might have. Anybody interested?
If your questions are boring, can I tell my Mahomes story? All right, we'll get to that one. Yeah, can you tell me your question and I'll repeat it, okay? Question is, what is the biggest thing that the town of Enfield can do to save these sports? Yeah. I'll tell you exactly what the town of Enfield can do. We, Bob, Paul, Russ, and I, along with the generosity of a lot of people, have made it possible that in the 25-26 academic year, 17 sports will be returned to 6th, 7th, 8th, and 9th grades. Beyond that is a bit of a question mark. That's why originally our goal was 100,000. But obviously, if we just raise 100,000 and then we go out and we have one great year with the sports coming back, and then the following year we don't have money to fund the sports, they might go away again. So we decided we were going to try to go beyond that as much as we can. So hopefully we'll end up fairly far beyond 100,000. We're at about 125 now. But what we need to make sure that everybody in Enfield realizes is that, I mean, this is going to be up to you. And it's going to be up to you going and talking to the members of the school board, talking to the people in administration, just saying these sports are important to us. And again, I would never in a million years say that that a sport is more important than a really good teacher, because I don't believe that. But my belief and our belief, I mean, Paul, Russ, and Bob, you know, have been adamant that this is not about choosing sports over staff members or teachers. You know, we need both. And so I just hope that people will understand that we need help to keep these sports going forever. Because honestly, for us, this is a one and done deal. This is it. In many ways, it's been a pleasure, but it's been some work. So we need everybody to understand that, you know, beyond this first year, the town is going to need some help to keep these sports going forever. Okay. Sorry. Anybody?
Dave, do you have anybody over there that's interested in asking a question, or Corey?
Got one in the back over here.
Peter, do you have any feelings about how this generation of new technology of artificial intelligence will work its way into the fantasy football leagues?
Will work its way into what?
Fantasy football.
I mean, artificial intelligence is going to work its way into every aspect of our lives. I think it's probably more fortunate than unfortunate, but I don't think anybody knows the answer to that. Look, there's only so much you can do to get to know who's any good in fantasy football. I have played over the years, some for charity and some in a family fantasy football league, and I think my average finish is about 11th. And I'm supposed to know what I'm doing. It's just, fantasy football is a dart throw so often. It's easy to say, hey, let's draft Saquon Barkley. Well, no crap, Sherlock, let's draft Saquon Barkley. But how many people in fantasy football leagues everywhere, there's some artificial intelligence would not have been able to help. Would artificial intelligence have told you that Christian McCaffrey was going to miss the first 9 games of the season? No. 89% of the 43 million people who play in fantasy football leagues, that's a bad stat. 89% of the fantasy football leagues in the United States, done by ESPN.com, 89%. The first pick of that draft was Christian McCaffrey. Maybe he'll miss a week, maybe he'll miss 2, maybe he won't miss any. Now he's missed 9. There's no guarantee. I think he's probably going to play in Tampa Sunday, but there's no guarantee in that. So there are some things that I think artificial intelligence can help. I doubt it's going to help fantasy football much at all.
Got another one for you back here.
Yeah.
If there's any way that student athletes can help?
Is there any way that student athletes can help?
Yeah.
I don't know of one right now, but that's only because we haven't thought about it. But it's a wonderful gesture. Much, much appreciated. What's your name? Jason? Okay. I mean, why don't you, what sport do you play? Okay. Listen, just stay for 5 minutes afterwards, and we'll get your name, email, phone, and then let's talk, because you definitely can help. I just don't know exactly in what way. Okay? Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
Peter, you did give me Arian Foster one year, so I'm going to give you credit for that, for fantasy.
Oh, well, he's given me credit for telling everybody to draft Arian Foster, a 7th-round draft choice for the Houston Texans in his first year. I went to Texans training camp, and it was going to be the Arian Foster show. Not many people knew that, but I'm also the person who said the first year that Steve Spurrier coached in Washington, you know what you should do? Take Danny Warfield. Let all the great quarterbacks walk on by. And then in the last round, take Danny Warfield. You'll be laughing all the way to the bank. I mean, I probably got 75 emails saying, not with many nice words in there, saying, thank you for effing up my fantasy. Yeah.
The question was really, is there anyone like Bill Parcells in the league right now? Do you think there ever will be anyone else like Bill?
Question is there anybody like Bill Parcells in the league right now? Bill Parcells, for those who know Enfield sports, I can tell you that Bill Parcells reminds me a lot of Bob Brummett. In many days, life just really wasn't going to be very good for you, because he was just really, really tough. But he was also incredibly smart about both the sport and about how to handle people. The same as Bob was. And to me, I just think it's hard to handle players the way Parcells did in the 80s and 90s today, just because you've got a bunch of other coaches. Like, who are the really, really good coaches right now? Obviously, Andy Reid. I mean, there's a lot of good coaches, but there's some of the young coaches who, and I'm not saying this in a derogatory way, they're power and positive thinking guys in all aspects of life. Sean McVay, Dan Quinn in Washington. There's a lot of that. Kevin Stefanski in Cleveland. And so I don't really think there have been many like Parcells at all. And I say that, I mean, I got to know him extremely well, still talk to him quite often. And I think I think in some ways, like Jimmy Johnson, Jimmy Johnson actually majored in psychology at Arkansas when he was in college. Parcells should have, because he's a shrink. I'm telling you, he's really smart about what makes human beings tick. Yes, Ken.
Hey, thanks again for inviting me to this. Actually,
Sure.
I'm from Pittsburgh.
Ken's from Pittsburgh. He came in from Pittsburgh.
So I wanted to make a comment about your Sports Illustrated career. My late father, he passed away about 10 years ago. He was a subscriber to SI, at least through my whole childhood, ever since I got into school. And 51 weeks a year, the Sports Illustrated issue would show up usually on a Thursday. And when he got sick with multiple sclerosis, he was quadriplegic. I would help him read the magazine. The first article he always wanted to read was Peter King's article. 51 weeks a year, because there was one exception. That's the swimsuit.
You know, I'll tell you a quick story about the swimsuit issue.
Which was going to be my question, if you've ever done a piece on it.
No. I was not a big fan of the swimsuit issue. And the reason I wasn't a big fan of the swimsuit issue is that, and look, I'm sure everybody knows what this is, I just didn't think it was really cool for women when in the swimsuit issue, you would see pictures of women who didn't have a swimsuit on. You know, their swimsuit would be hanging over the fence, and they would have their back to the camera looking back at you. And I remember, after one of those times that happened, I went to talk to our editor at the time, and I said, this is bad. This is bad for us. This is soft porn. We shouldn't be doing this. We really shouldn't be doing this. And so, and I'll never forget what happened. He called the people who did the swimsuit issue and said, from now on, we're not going to have any pictures in the magazine with women who are not wearing the swimsuit. So I was kind of happy with that, but whatever. And I have to say something really, really nice about my wife, Ann. Ann is here tonight. Ann, would you wave to the crowd? Here's Ann. Okay, so after one of the football seasons, I got a call from the marketing department at SI, and they said, Miller Lite would like to do a print ad of you and Rebecca Romine, who was one of the swimsuit models, wants to do an ad with you and Rebecca Romine for Miller Lite, and they'll pay you $50,000. And look, I know I'm fabulously independently wealthy, but 50,000 is 50,000. So I just thought, well, I got to do that, don't I? And I came home and I told Ann about it. She goes, "You're not doing that." She said, "You're a journalist. You can't be doing an advertisement for a beer, and you can't be in an ad campaign with a swimsuit model. It's just not right. It's not good." So I told them, "Hey, listen, I can't do this, and I'm not going to do this." But the postscript of the story is hilarious. Rick Riley, at the time, who was our columnist, ended up doing the ad, and Columbia Journalism Review wrote this scathing story about Rick Riley selling himself out for $50,000. And I went to Ann and I said, "I love you so much." Anyway.
Yeah, Corey, do you want to get that video ready to roll while Peter answers the next question?
Right there, in the back. Yelling.
When you first started out, who did you look up to? Who was
when I first started out, well, I'm going to say this is going to sound kind of cocky, but I didn't handle it like that. I didn't look up to somebody and say such and such is my hero. Because I don't think in this business, I don't think in any business, you should say, oh my God, this person who is great at this job, that's my hero. However, there were a couple of people I looked up to a lot. One was a guy named Peter Gammons. He worked for the Boston Globe and later for a lot of different places. When I was a junior in high school, my dad and I, we lived on South Road, and my dad and I would have a ritual every Sunday. We would drive to Tats in Thompsonville, the newspaper shop, and we would get 7 newspapers. My father he was an iron worker, but he was a newspaper junkie. So my dad would buy 7 papers, and my junior year was, I think, if I'm not mistaken, Peter Gammons' first year writing the notes column at the Boston Globe. And I remember after about the 4th or 5th time I read it, I said, that's what I want to do when I grow up. And I met Gammons a few years ago. I had met him a couple times, but, whatever. And I told him that story. And he said, oh my God, wow. And so that was kind of a cool thing. And the other guy I looked up to and who I learned a lot from because I worked with him was Paul Zimmerman, Dr. Z at Sports Illustrated. Kind of a rough and tumble, tough guy, not altogether pleasant, but really taught me one of the best things he ever taught me. There was an NFC championship game once that the 49ers won, and I saw him after the game for like 45 minutes, and he did not do any interviews after that game where another person was present. It was just him and a player alone, or him and a coach alone. And I asked him about it afterwards, and he goes, your job is not to help these other guys do their job by asking the questions and then taking the players' great answers and using it for themselves. Your job is to get interviews one-on-one with people to learn as much as you can. So I'd say Peter Gammons and Paul Zimmerman. Yeah, go ahead.
First, thank you for coming out to support our hometown. It means a lot. Such devastating news with all the sports and the things we're caught. But my question is, who did you not get a chance to interview that you would have liked to interview?
This is kind of funny, but in one of the years I was covering the New York Giants for Newsday, Richard Nixon was in the locker room after the game. He lived in Upper Saddle River, New Jersey, and a few towns away from East Rutherford where the Giants played. And he would come to every home game. He's a huge football fan. And one day he was waiting at Harry Carson's locker after the game, and I was waiting for Harry Carson. He looked over at me, and I had my notebook. I introduced myself. I said, hey, Peter King with Newsday, Mr. Nixon, hello. And he goes, you have the job that I always wanted to do. I wanted to be a sports writer. And I said, well, with all due respect, I would never have wanted to have your job. And he laughed, and he goes, with good reason. But I would say, there is one person who in my life that I wish I had had the chance to talk to and interview, and it's because he coached a long time ago, and by the time I started to do it, he was dead, and that's Vince Lombardi. I really wish that I was able to be around him and to get to know him a little bit, but that's the way life goes. Are we ready, Rusty?
Corey, if you're all set to go.
How we doing, Corey?
So Corey, I'm going to a quick introduction and then, what do you say, let it roll? Let it roll. So we have a short video from Chris Berman ready to go at this point. And by way of short introduction, soon after Chris graduated from Brown University in 77, ESPN astutely scooped him up. He's been with the flagship station since. He's been called the face of ESPN. The Swami, as he's known, remains one of the most recognizable sports media personalities in the world. And so we contacted Chris early on to gauge his availability for tonight. Why the Swami? Because he has been a good friend of Peter King's for decades. So Chris responded that he was going to be out of state. He lives in Cheshire. But he immediately offered to do a video and ship it along, and he's done that. So I don't believe that Chris has previously been previously been to Enfield High, Peter. So I can't say that he is back to EHS. But he's offered a very short video for tonight's event as a salute to you, Peter. So Corey, let it roll.
Hi there, this is the Swami. I'd love to join everybody tonight in saluting my dear friend Peter King. Peter has been an icon in the pro football world, in the football sportscasting world, and more importantly, in the sports writing world. But when you step out and help your hometown of Enfield, you are really an icon, knowing that there is no better education that a boy or girl can get playing team sports and ensuring that middle schoolers next year in Enfield will have that opportunity again. Peter, you the man.
Chris is an interesting guy because he's there's nobody I met in my 40 years who loves football as much as him. He's semi-retired now, and every Friday, he gets Andy Reid on the phone to say hello and calls coaches all over the league. He's not using it for anything. He just misses so much the daily, weekly contact with everybody in the NFL. So lots of great admiration for him. And God, he's one of the most clever people I've ever met in my life. And it's kind of funny. And one time I said to him, man, you could have done, I said, you could have been Jimmy Kimmel. You could have been Colbert. You could have been, Johnny Carson, 3 generations ago. So I really think he is so clever about everything. And he reads everything. But anyway, I'm lucky to know him. He's a really nice person and a good human being.
Peter, thank you. So we have some thank yous for people who have given tremendous assistance to the SOS group, and we'll go through that.
Yeah, good.
Right now, take a couple moments. So first, we want to say thank you to Superintendent Mike Macchio. I understand he's here, and also Assistant Superintendent, formerly Acting Superintendent Andy Longy. We need to thank Bull for avoiding some mealy-mouthed, mushy response to Peter, which would have turned this event into a non-event. Andy provided the amount that would be necessary to return the 17 sports to action, and he did it in writing. And Mike gave his approval as soon as he was able. So thanks to both for your leadership. The town of Enfield is fortunate to have you gentlemen as captains of the good ship SS Enfield Education. And I think Mike is here tonight somewhere from what I understand, but thanks very much to both of you. In addition, Director of Athletics Corey O'Connell has earned our thanks as well. Among many other things, he took care of arranging for the use of this auditorium tonight. Now, so we didn't have to take care of all the details that were involved with that. So it's totally seamless for the SOS group. Corey, thank you. Now, Mr. Murray, assistant principal at Enfield High School, provided a calming presence, ingenious ideas, tours of these facilities, and instantaneous service to the SOS group. So, Mr. Murray, we thank you for your guidance and your help. Not to be outdone by Mr. Murray, and since it is vital to remain steadfastly committed to the spirit of nepotism, Attorney Bridget Murray readily made her law offices on High Street available for meetings of the SOS group, sometimes on short notice, while always providing hospitality and even an occasional dose of humor. Attorney Murray, we thank you also. Tim Jensen, I'm not sure if he's here, but he dug into this with enthusiasm, providing coverage through his articles on Patch, arranging a promotional video with Cox Cable, and helping to get this televised tonight. Thank you, Tim. And Mark Warnock at Cox Cable, thank you for your expertise and your time and your service to save our sports, Mark. And really, we salute everyone on the team, coaches, students, teachers, administrators, and others at EHS and JFK, especially EHS Principal Aaron Clark. Thank you all. This event does not happen without the brainstorming and creativity of Bob Brummage and Paul DeSilva. Bob was a math teacher and baseball coach, as you have heard, among other duties for decades here at Enfield High School. Paul is the greatest boys basketball player to ever don an Enfield High School uniform. When one thinks of creativity, stars like John Ashton and Peter King come to mind. Baseball, math, basketball aren't typically in the forefront, although ingenuity does play a role in those areas. But for Bob and Paul, 279 young people out of sports was extremely troubling and got their creative juices flowing. That, combined with their experiences in athletics, with all of its benefits, guided them to the notion first of the evening with Peter King. And if that was feasible, then trying to raise the funds for the 17 sports and get them back in action. So Bob Brummage and Paul DeSilva should be teaching an advanced college course in creative thinking, gentlemen. I've got to show appreciation. Let's get back to some questions, Peter. They haven't even made you sweat yet.
I'm
Okay,
ready
I want to
to
have
go.
somebody ask you something.
I mean, I sweat. There's one.
All right, let's go.
Peter, thank you for coming. Gentlemen, Eddie, thank you for doing this. I was raised in Enfield, raised by a father from upstate New York, and the only channel he said his car got was 660. So that's all I listened to. So Mike and the Mad Dog naturally was my introduction to sports, and I still listen to Mad Dog to this day. And I was going to say that I love catching you every single week the past few years. I'm going to cut back on that. What else are you doing for like weekly hits? I know you're on the Jim Gray show on Monday nights. I've heard it a couple times. What else are you doing with that so people can hear you?
Nothing really. I'm just, I'm living the very good life. I do this Jim Gray Let's Go radio show and podcast every Monday. I tape it. But this year I basically wanted to do a few different things. We had a family reunion, 33 people from as far away as Spain and England and Seattle and the Bay Area. We did it in Boston for 5 days in late July. And then Ann and I just got back a couple of days ago from a 26-day driving trip to the West Coast, down the West Coast, and then across the middle of the country. And we just got back and 7,715 miles. And when we pulled into Brooklyn, into our neighborhood, Ann looked at me and said, "Oh, it's such a shame it has to end. Your stories are so fascinating." But I really didn't want to do very much this year. I just wanted to see how the other 98% live. Because one of the things, I'm a little bit possessed in my job. When I was a sports writer and I would walk into an NFL press box on Sunday, there'd be, I don't know, 250, 300 people. And I just had this attitude, I'm gonna write the best story of anybody in this room today. I mean, it sounds cocky and stupid and everything, but that's just the way I always thought. And so in order to do that, you have to have great preparation. You have to know a lot of people on each team so that whatever happens in the game, you can go find out exactly why it happened. And I mean, the last thing I ever did, other than the last couple of columns that I did, but the last game I covered was the Super Bowl, and in Las Vegas, and after the game, Andy Reid, who I've known since 1995, basically took me into his inner sanctum and told me, you know, how the winning play happened, who thought of it, who named it. It was called Tom and Jerry, you know, and all that stuff. And he said to me when I was leaving, he goes, "Is this really it?" And I said, "Yeah, this is really it." And he goes, I'll never forget this. He said, and I had told him that I was going to take this trip across the United States and back. He said, send me some pictures. So 6 or 7 times, we were in Mendocino, California a couple of weeks ago, and I sent him a picture at sunrise of a beautiful house and a tree with the Pacific Ocean in the background. And he wrote back and he goes, "Don't tempt me." But I just kind of wanted this year to take off, and we'll see what happens in the future. I don't have any plans right now, but we'll see. I still feel good, and we'll see what happens. Yes?
Do you have a favorite player and coach that you've covered over the years?
I would say the coach I really enjoyed covering was Parcells, because the reason that Parcells was good to cover is there were 19 newspapers that covered the Giants on a daily basis at the time. That's how much things have changed. But Bill would give the time of day to all 19, but the only way he would really help you try to do your job is if he knew that you were invested. And so I went to him in the second year I covered the team, and I said to him, "Hey, Bill," they had a rule that they didn't want any of the writers walking out of the press conference room with Parcells to get him one-on-one after his thing. And one day at practice, I said, "Bill, I can't operate like that. I mean, I can't get the same quotes from you as the guy from the Asbury Park Press. I can't do that." And so he said to me, "Okay, you really need me one day?" He said, "Be at my parking spot at 5:30 in the morning." And so about a week later, I said to Ann, it was like 4:45, I said, "I'm really sorry, but I gotta go in early." And she's thinking, "You're not going to work. Where are you going?" I said, "Yeah, I am. I gotta meet Parcells at his parking space." And I was standing there, and he drives in, and he looks at me and shakes his head, and he goes, "No effing way." But that is what made him fun to cover, because I figured out what it was going to take to get some good stuff out of Parcells. He used to have a thing where he would, every Sunday in the Giants Road Hotel, he would be at the hotel in the lobby drinking coffee by like 4:45. He couldn't sleep. And so I remember the Giants were going to play the Eagles, and the Giants were staying in a hotel in Cherry Hill, New Jersey. And I set my alarm, and I went down at 4:30 to the lobby, and I just waited and waited. And he went and got his coffee in this coffee urn in the corner, and went and sat down. and he had the Philadelphia Inquirer, and he was reading the paper. And I walked up to him, and he goes, "Oh, no, not you." So, but I just sat there for 45 minutes, and it was, mostly we sat in silence, but I just, wanted to see how he was feeling on the day of a big game. As far as players go, I said before that I really had to get to know the quarterbacks. And it probably won't be really fashionable to say this right now, but the player I really had a good relationship with over the years was Brett Favre. And to the point where one year, 1995, Mike Holmgren, the coach of the Packers, gave me permission to do a week in the life of the Packers. And he told his team, this is Peter King, he's from SI, he's going to be around our team the whole week. You can talk to him, you can not talk to him, but we want him to find out what it's really like here. So, whatever. And so, Favre came up to me. I didn't know him. I'd never met him before. He was still pretty young at the time. And he said to me, he asked me, he said, "Well, do you want to interview me?" And I said, "Well, I'd love to." And he goes, "When?" I said, "How about tonight at your house?" And he said, "Okay." So I followed him home, and I stayed there until about 11:30 at night. And 3 nights that week, I was at his house. And he was just, he never watched sports on TV other than golf. He loved to watch National Geographic. He loved watching nature shows. Absolutely loved it. And I remember that week thinking, oh my God, this guy, he doesn't need any sleep. He's always awake. Like I would leave there at 11:30 and he wasn't ready to go to bed. He was going to watch some more TV or whatever. And the postscript to that story is, you may all remember this, that in May, after this season, he was voted the MVP of the NFL. And in May, he went into rehab for a Vicodin addiction. And that weekend that he was going in, on Friday and Saturday, was going to be his first golf tournament in Gulfport, Mississippi for Special Olympics. And he had asked me late in the year, "Hey, I'm going to do this, would you come?" And I said, "Listen, I shoot 110. I'll be happy to come, but just make sure you warn whoever that this will be the worst charity golf tournament they ever play in." He said, "No, just come, just come." So anyway, night before, I got my plane ticket for the next day. I'm going to fly into Biloxi, Mississippi, and I get this phone call. It's from Favre. And he goes, "Hey, listen, something I got to tell you. I'm going into a clinic tomorrow in Wichita, Kansas, for an addiction of Vicodin. So I'm not going to make my golf tournament, but I need you to come. I'm calling everybody to say, listen, I can't come, but I promise Special Olympics, $100,000. The only way that happens is if you all come." I said, "Okay, I'll come." And he said, "Okay, thanks. Yeah, I got a few calls for you." I said, whoa. Wait a minute. What the hell is going on here? And so Favre is one of those guys, always has been, that he just never knew when to shut up. And so for the next 45 minutes, he told me the story. Here's how I almost died. We were at the ESPYs, my wife, Deanna, and me were at the ESPYs, and she looks over at me, she goes, "You're not right, what have you done?" And he goes, "So I can't lie?" I said, "I took 14 Vicodin." And so she said, "Oh, we gotta get help." So when we went back to Green Bay, I had to get some floating bodies out of my ankle. So he had to have an arthroscopic procedure done, but they were going to knock him out, and they knocked him out, and he went into a spasm on the table, almost swallowed his tongue, so anyway, the doctor said, "You weren't honest with you. What do you have in your body?" And he said, "Well, I've been taking Vicodin." And he said, "Well, you almost just died. So anyway, he went in, he did the rehab, came out, and I will never forget, I wrote this story after our conversation, and he goes, you know, what is so weird, I'm doing what I always wanted to do in my life at the absolute highest level. If I could have just been in the NFL for one day, I would have been happy. And here I am, I'm the NFL MVP. Everybody in the world, everybody when they meet me, they said, man, I wish I could be you. And he said, well, how would they like being me right now, being totally addicted to this painkiller and having to go into rehab, or else the NFL is never going to let me play again? How would they like that? And I said, probably not a lot. He said, no. Anyway, that's, you ask, okay, who, I mean, I've gotten to know quite a few players, but the players who you really appreciate are the players who are going to kind of bleed for you and are going to tell you exactly what they're thinking. And so, as I said, it's probably not the most popular answer to say Brett Favre based on the events in the last couple of years, but of all the players I've known, he was clearly the best in terms of spilling his guts. Can I tell you one last Favre story? You get a kick out of this. One of my favorite stories ever since I covered the NFL. The Packers were in the Super Bowl for the second consecutive year in San Diego. And at the time, they had been playing great for 3 or 4 years, won the Super Bowl previous year. So I was covering the Packers a lot. And on 7 consecutive times that I covered them, I went to dinner with Favre and his wife and his parents and maybe a couple of players on Friday night in Green Bay before the game. So I saw him during Super Bowl week, and I said, hey, good luck this week. And he goes, hey, what do you mean? We have to have dinner on Friday night. And I said, well, Super Bowl quarterback saying you gotta have dinner on Friday night? F yeah, let's go. So I said, what do you want to do? And he goes, I don't know, I'm too busy. You make the plans, there's gonna be 20 people. You make the plans, but there's one thing that you have to do. I said, what is it? He goes, I need you to find someone to sit with Breely at dinner. Breely was his 10-year-old daughter. And Breely was a really great kid, but she was fired up. And she was bouncing off walls and everything. And he goes, I'm just telling you, if we don't get somebody to hang with Breely that night, we're going to be a little bit distracted at dinner, which, hey, we'll do it, whatever. But do you know anybody? So you talk about being the luckiest man on the face of the earth, okay? My best guy friend from college lived in San Diego. His name was Dan Squiller. Dan had a 10-year-old daughter named Brooke. Now, I called Dan and I said, hey Dan, this was like Thursday afternoon. Hey Dan, how's it going? Hey, pretty good. I had seen him a couple of days previous, but I said, what is going to happen in your family? What's going on Friday night? And he goes, it's Brooke's 10th birthday. We have a huge party planned. And I said, and I explained the situation. And they were going out somewhere with all of her friends. And I called and I said, do you think that Brooke would like to go to dinner with Brett Favre on Friday night and be with, at the Super Bowl? And he goes, I don't know. This is a big deal for Brooke. Turning 10, double digits, a big night for Brooke Squiller. And he goes, here, why don't you ask her? And she gets on the phone, she goes, hi, Mr. King. I said, hey, Brooke, I hear you got a big party planned for Friday. She goes, yeah. And I said, well, look, happy birthday. I said, would you really be bothered if you did it on Saturday instead of Friday? And she goes, I don't know. And I said, well, I just wanted to ask you, on Friday night, Brett Favre, do you know what Brett Favre is? And she says, yeah, he's the Green Bay quarterback. And I said, Brett has invited me to go to dinner with him and his family, and he's got a 10-year-old daughter named Greeley, and Brett was looking for somebody to go with us on Friday. And she goes, I'm in. So I get on the phone with Dan, and I tell him, and I tell him what's going to happen, and he can't believe it. You know, Brooks Squiller is going to go have dinner with the two-time MVP quarterback of the Green Bay Packers at the Super Bowl. Crazy. We're at dinner. Brooks Squiller sat between me and Brett Favre. And it was just, Brett's talking to her half the night, you know. So anyway, at the end of the night, everybody's getting ready to go. And Brooks said, hey, Brett, I got something for you. And she pulls out a penny. It's a shiny penny. And she goes, Brett, this is my lucky penny. If you have this penny with you Sunday during the game, you have it with you during the game, it's a guaranteed win. And Brett said, okay, I'll take it. So obviously you think, what would you think? Brett's gonna put the thing in his pocket and that's it. The rest is history, it's over. So after the game, the 11-point favorite Packers get shocked by the Denver Broncos. They lose. And so I've got to write mostly about Denver. But the first thing I did was I hustled over into the Green Bay locker room just to shake Favre's hand and wish him, hey, good luck, sorry, blah, blah, blah. So I shook his hand and he goes, hey, I said, hey, gotta go, but I just wanted to come by and say, S word, what are you gonna do? Anyway, I said, thanks for Friday night, that was wonderful. He goes, hey, before you go, hold on a minute. Pulls off his sock. And on his right leg, there was white adhesive tape taped around his leg. And he takes it off, and in the white adhesive tape was a shiny penny. He had taken the penny, and he had taped it to his leg because Brooks Squiller gave him the penny. So he said, I want you to make sure you give this to Brooke. I'm sure it'll be lucky for her. And just tell her I'm sorry that I ruined the luck for her. And so I gave it back to her and told her the story, and she couldn't believe it. When Favre retired, I wrote a column on Brooke, and I told that story. And at the time, Brooke was doing an internship with a law firm in Ireland. And I said, do you remember the penny? And she goes, oh, I remember. And she told me the story. And so I wrote it in Sports Illustrated afterwards. But that's one of the reasons why I got along pretty well with Favre. Wow. Way back there. Hello. Yelling.
Oh, I have no problem projecting.
That's good, Tim.
I know it's about a quarter of a century ago, and it's still kind of a touchy subject in this area, but in your opinion, was there ever a snowball's chance in hell that the Patriots were coming to Ireland?
Yes. Yes. I had a long talk with Kraft, Luke Bob Kraft, that weekend, and absolutely unequivocally, he didn't want to do it. But he was convinced that he was never going to be able to get a deal in Massachusetts unless he paid for the stadium almost all himself. And so he understood that he would be in many quarters public enemy number one in Boston. He knew that. But he didn't want to sell the team. And, but anyway, I thought, we just drove by tonight, my wife and I, on our way here up 91. I looked over there and I said, man, how much football history would have been changed if the Patriots played in Hartford? Because Bill Belichick wouldn't have cared where the stadium was. You know, they would have built the team the exact same way. Now, who knows what would have happened? You can't absolutely say this, but I'll always think that if the Patriots had come to Connecticut and for some reason Belichick, because I assume Belichick wouldn't have cared, that there would have been a Super Bowl champion, multiple, that would have played in Hartford. Would have been pretty unbelievable. Yes, go ahead. Yeah. Vince Lombardi was before my time. I said a little bit earlier, he's one guy who I wish I could have met and never did. I mean, I was 13 when he died. So, Vince Lombardi left Green Bay, I believe, because he felt that the committee who ran the team, or kind of owned the team, was muscling in a little bit on his turf. And I don't know that for a fact, but that's always been part of the story. Go ahead.
I heard that recently that because it's football and it's common style.
Yeah, I just don't know that. I mean, I was in 6th grade when he died, so yeah, I don't know enough about it. Over there.
First of all, I want to say thank you. I have 2 granddaughters, one who's in 5th grade going into 6th grade, one who's in 7th grade going into 8th grade. They both play sports, multiple sports. So I want to thank you for your efforts in helping them return sports to the middle school age children here very much. Secondly, I have a friend who was a long-term assistant coach for the Patriots. And I've heard some stories about Bill Belichick, and I wondered, from your perspective, what the rest of the NFL thinks about Belichick, and why isn't he coaching today?
Well, I actually knew Bill pretty well. I wrote a long story about him for Sports Illustrated after they won their 2nd Super Bowl, and I got to go spend some time in his childhood home in Annapolis with his parents, and even saw his room where he grew up. I think that let's answer the last question first. Look, I think the reason he's not coaching is that the Atlanta Falcons wanted more of a football coach who all he did was coach. They didn't want a football coach who, in the immortal words of Bill Parcells, wanted to buy the groceries too. So I think that's the reason why he isn't coaching now. However, I think Bill understands that he shouldn't have control over personnel right now. He did a crappy job the last few years in New England. There's no other way to put it. So he's going to probably go coach somewhere next year. My best guess is Dallas, but I don't know. Nobody knows yet. But I think he'll coach again next year. And what do people around the league think of him? I think most people believe that he is, the smartest coach in modern football history. I don't think football history, because in my opinion, Paul Brown is the greatest coach of all time. But he certainly is in the discussion as the greatest coach of all time. And I think he's extremely smart But I also think the one thing that he needs to do is he needs to modernize a few things in his coaching life, analytics being number one. You know, you can turn your back on intelligence, but after a while, the people who pay attention to the real scientific look at football, I'm not saying they're going to be better coaches than Bill, but they're going to be better prepared than Bill. So we'll see what happens. Yeah.
I'd just like your views on where the NFL is going with CTE and concussion protocol. You know, this past couple of years, we watched Miami's Tua, more than once lay on the field and experience modeling after he got hit and everything else. And really, as a lifelong NFL football fan, I'm your age and I've seen it all. What's your feeling on where it's going and what can be done to better protect our youth coming up so we have the integrity of football?
If I were a parent now and I was allowing my child to play, there's this movement in the NFL now to use position-specific helmets. And to give you an example of what that's like, a position-specific helmet for a quarterback is made by a company called Lysis. It's in Seattle. And what they have done is they have figured out a way using Kevlar and other materials to, inside the helmet, between the back of your head and the shell of the helmet, there's about 3 times more protection, because most quarterback concussions occur when their head snaps back and hits the field. So you ask about, first of all, if I were a player in the NFL, I not only would be, because every position in 2 or 3 years will have a position-specific helmet. The NFL has studied where each player, where each position group gets hit the most. How do concussions result in that group? And they're trying to make the helmet better in those areas. But the other thing I would do, you've seen the Guardian caps on players. You know, it's like a pillow on top of your head and surrounding your helmet. I'd wear one of those. They weigh 13 ounces. And although some guys say when it rains that it really gets heavy, they'll figure all that out. But I don't know why you wouldn't take full advantage of wearing both a position-specific helmet and the Guardian caps. And this is just me. If my child were growing up playing tackle football right now, I would ask the coach and I would ask I don't know who's going to spend the money to do this. But I would like, if I were a quarterback in playing middle school, high school football, I would want the best helmet humanly possible to make sure that I was not concussed. There's no guarantee. There's nothing ever that's going to be guaranteed. I think the one other thing I would say is, I don't know, somebody asked me when I retired, what do you think the future of football is? And I said, well, I think there will most likely always be football, at least, for the next 25, 30 years, it's going to be around for a while. But in my opinion, I think sometime in the next 5, 6, 7 years, that flag football is going to be around the United States, will be more popular than all but football and tackle football and basketball. I think flag football in the next 8 to 10 years, and this is going to sound crazy, because I love baseball. I think flag football is going to overtake baseball in terms of popularity, particularly among youth.
You got a couple of young guys right
Yes,
here.
go ahead.
They're full of damn seats right to ask you a question.
Go ahead. Have I met Patrick Mahomes? Yes, I have met Patrick Mahomes. So I'll tell you, you want me to tell you a quick little Mahomes story? So, I don't know if you remember this. How old are you? Okay. when you were maybe 5, Patrick Mahomes completed a pass to someone without looking at him, okay? They called it a no-look pass, but the guy was over here, and he was looking over here, and he just went like this. And so that year in the playoffs, I was working for NBC at the time, and they said, we want you to go in and interview Mahomes. Make sure you ask him about the no-look pass. So I knew him a little bit. I didn't know him well. And I went in and I said, hey, Patrick, understand one thing in the NFL today, the media relations people have a lasso around players, and they are not very flexible with what they allow you to do. So I could have done one of two things. I could have either done a walk and talk, which is what they call in the business when you put a microphone on a guy and you have a camera 5 yards away and you just walk back. We walk forward, I walk with him, and the camera guy just walks backwards for 100 yards, and you do the interview that way. Or I can sit down with him in a chair, and I said, I'll take the walk and talk. So when Mahomes walks in, I said, hey, Patrick, want to make a little wager? And he laughed, and he said, what? And I said, we set up some garbage cans at the end. We're going to do a walk and talk, but we set up some garbage cans, and if you can sort of duplicate your no-look pass and hit the garbage can, you will win one of the best bottles of wine in America. I knew that Patrick likes Cabernet, red wine. You'll win one of the best bottles of wine in America. And so he said, I'm in. And he goes, what do I have to give you if I don't get it? I said, no, nothing. I'll give you, if you do it, you get a great bottle of red wine. He said, okay. So we go down there, and we finish the interview, and I said, okay, now we're going to talk about the no-look pass. How did it happen? What exactly happened? So I tossed him a football. Camera person is focused on him, and he goes, I'll tell you exactly what happened. I was focused. One of my receivers ran the wrong way on the play, and I expected to throw the ball to him, but then, I think it was DeMarcus Robinson, but I'm not positive. He said, but then I saw DeMarcus out of the corner of my eye, and don't hold me to that, it might not have been him. But I saw my guy out of the corner of my eye, but I was looking for Gary Dieter on the play, but he wasn't there. I said, where is he? And all of a sudden, corner of my eye, I got no time, so then I just throw. And he threw the ball 27 yards in the air, and it hit the garbage can flush right on the side, knocked it over. And so at the end of it, and he goes, all right, when do I get my wine? So the funny part of that is the guy who I knew, the guy who used to be the president of the San Francisco 49ers, was a wealthy guy for various reasons. But anyway, I called him and I said, hey, I said he had a bottle of Cabernet that I'm guessing was $800 or $1,000. And I said, listen, I hate to ask for a favor, but I said, I just bet a bottle of your wine that Patrick Mahomes couldn't duplicate the no-look pass and hit a garbage can. And this guy's name is Carmen Policy. And I said, Carmen, you won't believe it. From 27 yards, he hit it flush right in the middle. It was a perfect throw. And he said, well, what can I do? And I said, I bet him a bottle of your cab. And I said, and listen, I'm telling you, I'll pay for it. But he said, no, I'll send it to him. And so a couple of weeks later, Mahomes gets this bottle, and I saw him the next year in training camp. I said, did you ever get that wine? He goes, that was a fantastic bottle. So everybody went away happy, and I got a fun story to tell, at the Enfield High School auditorium 5 years later. Go ahead. Yes. My favorite person to interview, well, let's take Brett Favre out of it. And I'll tell you, one person who I really liked interviewing was a defensive tackle for the Minnesota Vikings. And the reason that I liked interviewing him, his name is John Randall, and he ended up making the Hall of Fame. And he was in the middle of a really good career. Sports Illustrated said, go do a story on John Randall. John Randall grew up dirt poor in the middle of nowhere, Texas. When I say dirt poor, he grew up in a house that didn't have a bathroom. In his house, and I know because he took me to what remained of his house, which I will say it was a shack, and that's giving it a lot of credit, because it was open, okay? And it was so decrepit and old that you stood in the middle of it and you could feel the wind coming through it. And so this is how John Randall lived, with his brother and his mom, who worked 2 jobs. She was a single mom. And he brought me out back and he goes, guess what that is? And there was a pole there. And there was a nail in the pole. He goes, we would hang a bucket from that, and that was our bathroom. So we went there, and he starts telling me the story, and he sits on the front steps for about 10 minutes. He just cries like a baby, because he had just signed a $32 million contract, and he was the best defensive tackle in football. And I said, what are you thinking about? And when he composed himself, he goes, how the F did I ever get out of here? And so I've seen him a few times over the years. I wasn't really tight with him or anything like that, but I've seen him a few times over the years, and he goes, man, the only guy I ever brought back to my house. He said, that was an amazing day. You want to know what else was amazing about that day? There's a hamburger chain in Texas called Whataburger. And I don't know if you've ever heard of it, but it's spelled Whataburger. It's all one word. Whataburger. That's what it is. So I said, oh, this is good. So it was about 1 o'clock, and he wanted to take me around to all the places. Here's where I played high school. Here was where our prom was, here, and all this stuff. It's okay. It got to be late in the afternoon, and he said, are you hungry? And I said, yeah. And he goes, let's go to dinner. So I said, okay, where are we going? He goes, Whataburger. We ate lunch at Whataburger. And he goes, I know we ate lunch. He said, if there was another meal after dinner, we'd go to Whataburger for a third time. John Randall, this just in, loves Whataburger. Go ahead.
What do you think about the AFC East? And do you think the Buffalo Bills have it locked? And do you think the Buffalo Bills will contend to win the Super Bowl this season?
The Buffalo Bills have it locked. It is locked, baby. I think the game of the year is going to be Kansas City at Buffalo here in a couple of weeks. It's going to be a fantastic game. The reason why that's important is that everybody might look right now and say, well, Kansas City's going to have home field in the AFC. They're undefeated. But if Buffalo beats them, they'll have the tiebreaker head-to-head. If they tie, then the championship game potentially would be in Buffalo. Now, Kansas City has proven that that's not the biggest deal in the world, because they obviously won in Buffalo and they got them to the Super Bowl. But I think Buffalo is far and away the best team in that division, so yes. Yes.
As a student athlete in class field on the court, what's one of your most fondest memories of being a student athlete here at Enfield High School?
In the fall of 1970, or in the spring of 1975, we had a game, Enfield High had a game at East Hartford. I played first base at the time, and we were facing a team that had an all-state pitcher named George Frothingham. And I mean, this is how sick I am. I remember the name of a pitcher for East Hartford High School from 1975. So we played against East Hartford in East Hartford. I hit 2 triples, knocked in 3 runs, and we won the game 5-3. And what was so odd about that is that at the time, I was the Enfield High School sports correspondent for the Journal-Inquirer. So after every baseball game, after every basketball game, after every soccer game, and after every football game, my assignment was to write about a 6 or 8 paragraph story, maybe 400 words, 500 words, and then I would type it on my mother's typewriter, a Royal typewriter, and I type it, and by 12 o'clock that night, I had to bring it to the JI's satellite office it was either in Ellington or Vernon, I forget. I think it was in Ellington. So I would get in the car, I had my license, I'd get in the car, I'd drive it out there and come home and go to bed. So imagine you've had really like one of the great days you've ever had as a baseball player. You got 2 triples off of an all-state pitcher, and we won the game. So I'm writing the story, and I had to figure out, oh my God, this is like the ultimate humble brag. I mean, how in the world can I write this story? There's only one story. Peter King knocked in 3 runs with 2 triples, blah, blah, blah. And so I had to really understate it in the story and talk about how everybody else did so great that game. But what I'll never forget this. Phil Chartis, who was the assistant sports editor, laid out the paper all the time. And he put a little headline on the story. And the headline was, King carries hot bat. And I just said to myself, my God, I gotta save this thing for the rest of my life because it'll never get any better than this. I'll never have a better moment than this. And that was right. I never had a better moment.
Just a second. Yeah, let's take one more question.
Yeah. Way back.
You must say
Eli Manning is a Hall of Famer.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you the reason he's a Hall of Famer. Because I'm not one of those guys, and I was a Hall of Fame voter for 33 years before resigning when I retired. And I think a lot of times we have given way too much credit for simply winning Super Bowls. I'm just not a big fan of that. Like, I don't think Jim Plunkett is a Hall of Famer. He's not. He was on, there have been, I think, 3 players who aren't in the Hall of Fame as quarterbacks who won 2 Super Bowls. And I just don't think Jim Plunkett is a Hall of Famer. But Eli Manning not only won 2 Super Bowls and was in the top 10 in every major passing category when he retired for football, but he beat Belichick and Brady and prevented the Patriots from having 8 Super Bowls instead of 6. And when you say that you played great down the stretch, you played better down the stretch than Tom Brady. And Tom Coughlin, obviously a great coach in his own right. But Eli Manning made 2 or 3 throws in each of those games. His throw to Mario Manningham down the left sideline in the second Super Bowl win is one of the great passes in NFL history. So it isn't like he tagged along and was along for the ride. Eli Manning is the reason they won both those Super Bowls. So yeah, he definitely deserves to be in the Hall of Fame. We got 2 more. Way back. Never met Hunter S. Thompson. Probably my liver is better off there.
Hi, thank you. What are your thoughts on the influence of the legalized gambling and sports betting that's so readily available?
I think 10 years from now, there will be more people in Gamblers Anonymous than there are today in Alcoholics Anonymous. I think it's terrible. I think the NFL should be ashamed of itself for crawling into bed, and just because they can make a lot of money with gambling elements. 7 years ago, Roger Goodell said we can't allow sports gambling to be the death knell. I forget what his exact words were, but he has always been, you can't have gambling. So now, just because it's legal, you take every last dime from, gambling. And look, it's legal. There's nothing anybody can do about it. But the NFL has just fallen into bed so hopelessly with all of these gambling companies. I think it's sad, and I think there are going to be tens of thousands of lives ruined by this. Ruined.
Hopefully you guys realize that there's your Hall of Famers. There's 4 individuals up there that really care about this town. I just want to say thank you.
All right.
SOS Group has a message of thanks to you that I'd like to take care of. And when I'm done, you can close the whole thing out.
Okay.
All right, so folks, you've shown Peter some love tonight. It's now time, Enfield, to show him some true big-time love. Peter retired in February of this year after cementing his legacy as the premier football journalist of all time. That is, of all time.
No, come on.
Peter,
Stop.
Peter.
Russ, stop.
Poetic license. Poetic license right
Stop.
here.
We're not on the Mark Twain playground anymore. Stop.
Well, that meant he also retired from 40 years worth of planes, trains, cabs, Ubers, drivers, hotels, meetings, dinners, breakfast, meals on the run, and travel around the country and all over the globe. So the travel may sound glamorous to some, Peter, but after 40 years, it can turn into exhausting and grueling. He was done, folks. He was cooked. Finished. But he was going to be able to stay at home much more. Curl up on a couch, tune into some Jeopardy and some MASH reruns, and have some New York-style pizza, no thick crust, and take some wine. His daughters live on the West Coast with his grandchildren. He'll be able to spend considerably more time with them. He could be doing those things tonight, folks. But then, what happened? What happened is that he heard 279 taps, so soft yet so clear, on his Brooklyn door. For JFK Middle School, for Enfield High School, and for the town of Enfield, it was back to work for Peter King. Now consider that he made trips from his Brooklyn home to Foxborough, to MetLife Stadium, East Rutherford, New Jersey, to Baltimore, to Somerville, New Jersey, to Milford, Connecticut, and much more, advancing this cause. He has a journey to Indianapolis scheduled for Saturday, that's 2 days from now, as well as an excursion to Connecticut in December to have a meal with Jim Calhoun. And he made sure that he would be busy in 2025 by scheduling a golf match in the spring down in Maryland, at which he will display his PGA award-winning form. In his spare time advancing the cause, he sent emails, made phone calls, posted on Instagram and on Facebook. And his own brainstorming with the SOS group was nonstop and just plain exceptional. And here's an understatement of all time. Peter has an active mind. Permit me to give you just one example of his dedication. On October 1st at about 11 a.m., he took an Uber from his home in Brooklyn to Penn Station and boarded the train to Baltimore. He arrived in the charmed city and hustled to his hotel, then to dinner with donors. Arrived back at his hotel at about 10 p.m. to get a good night's sleep. Well, on October 2, he was up at 4 a.m. to head to the station in Baltimore in order to board a train for the 5-hour trek to Milford, Connecticut. He appeared on Fox Sports, on the Dan Patrick Show in the late morning. Then he had pizza with Dan Patrick and Donor, who had flown in from Phoenix, Arizona for that opportunity. He then took an Uber back to the Milford Depot, headed home to Brooklyn, arriving at about 8 p.m. after spending 33 hours totally dedicated to the SOS cause. So I could say that Peter devoted 100 hours or so to save our sports, and that number would be outrageously wrong. It's far more accurate to say that Peter dedicated hundreds and hundreds of hours to this cause. So folks, Peter is the MVP of this SOS initiative. He's the MVP of this evening. But way beyond that, Peter King is the MVP of the town of Enfield, in my estimation, in our estimation. So how to try to properly express our gratitude to Peter? A memorable thank you. Well, many of us in this auditorium have been to events here before. There have been tremendous lengthy applauses, standing ovations in recognition of superior performances or individual achievements. We don't believe there's ever been in this auditorium a tremendous and lengthy standing ovation accompanied by a chant of just 3 letters, MVP. So, Enfield, please join in by rising to your feet as one, putting your hands together until they sting on the count of 3, MVP. 1,001, 1,002.
Thank you. And, I should say that not only was this a labor of love, I'm just happy that so many people came out tonight who I haven't seen in 100 years, and actually 50 years for many of them. But who I haven't seen for so long. It's great of you to come out. It's great to see everybody. And look, one of the things that has been really cool about this team, this is a ridiculous, stupid, idiotic cliche, but it's absolutely true. I mean, I get a lot of the credit from Russ and from Bob and Paul, but they are the ones who basically birthed this and made it all happen. It never happened without Russ, Bob, and Paul in any way, because they said, we can't let this stand. We have to do something about it. They are the engines behind this. They're the generators. So I just want to say thank you to you guys, and really, thanks so much for calling me and getting me involved in it. It was tremendous. Thank you.
you.